or you might be interested in the mining of Bitcoin, but these things are only features of Bitcoin. It's not why Bitcoin matters. So let me tell you why Bitcoin matters. So use this to kind of follow where we're going along throughout this. You can always keep track of what I'm saying by just following this timeline. I'm going to give you a history of money and how we got here today. So it'll start with 100,000 years ago, 25,000, and 5,000 years ago. So you can easily just look at this for reference. But to start, does anybody know how money was created?
Trading. Trading?
What kind of trading?
With the barter system?
Thank you.
Good for goods?
I'm glad someone said that. We kind of were all taught that money was born out of barter. You know, barter is, I have 5 apples, you have 5 oranges, and we make a trade that seems fair to both of us. So that was how we were kind of taught that how money was created, but it wasn't. This is the way money was created. We only used money ever since around 100,000 years ago, once there were tribes that existed. We only used money as a ledger. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So the first form of money we had was a subjective ledger. Now subjective means it's not facts, it's opinions. So there were tribes and they were hunting and gathering at the time. So we would go kill a buffalo, and so they say I have the buffalo and you guys want a piece of meat. I'd have to give you guys some meat, and I'd have to remember. It was called lending. I'd have to remember. It was a subjective ledger. I'd have to remember how much I gave you. And that's how people interact, that's how people exchange. That was money 100,000 years ago. People they used a subjective ledger, and it was remembering what you owed people. So then there came a time where tribes wanted to trade with other tribes in the area. And yeah, so then we moved to the objective ledger. And the objective ledger, it's fact-based. It's something that's real. It's no longer opinions. So they used something that was real. And what they did around 25,000 years ago, someone came up with a brilliant idea, you know. They wanted to keep track of debt better, because it was too hard to remember what you owed people. They wanted to keep track of debt in a more efficient way. So what they did was they came up with this idea, and they used collectibles. So they came up with this idea to keep track of people's debt. And what they used as an objective ledger, it was something within their environment that was scarce. Does everybody know what scarce means? Like, it's hard to find, it's very rare, it's hard to come by. So they used something that was scarce within the community, within the area, and it had 5 attributes. It had to be durable, it doesn't decay or erode, it had to be durable, divisible, so it could be divided, transportable, it's easy to move around, recognizable, and fungible. These are attributes that hold still with money today. So this was the first example of an objective ledger that used something scarce that had 5 attributes in the environment. So this is how money was used around 25,000 years ago. So what they did was they used something in the area that was scarce. So for example, there were many things tribes used. Tribes used beads, tribes used stones, tribes used salt. It was whatever was scarce within the area. So for example, I came up to you one day and I said, hey, I need some of your firewood. You'd be like, okay, here's your firewood. And I'd be like, okay, here's some beads though. And the person would be like, wait, I don't want any beads, I don't need any beads. And you'd say, no, it's not about the beads. This is just a way to keep track of debt. You know what I mean? Like, so I asked for firewood from you guys, and you guys gave me firewood. So instead of you guys just having to remember how much I owed you, we used beads. Let's just say beads, that was something that was scarce in the environment, to keep track of debt. So that was how we kept track of how much we owed. So say you gave me 10 pieces of firewood, I would give you 10 beads, and that's how we kept track of debt. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me have some water. So nobody's confused right now, right? It's pretty easy what I'm talking about. Okay, great. So I just gave you guys a very short, high-level history of money. I didn't find out about this until I started looking into Bitcoin, but before we can move on to the last ledger, there's three common myths that I need you guys. There's three common myths about money that I need to go over and I need to dispel before I can go any further. So the first myth is that money was born in a barter, like the gentleman said himself. But money was not born in a barter, it was just used as a way to keep track of debt, as you guys saw here, right? The other myth is that money is backed by an asset. So some people used to say, oh, well, the US dollar used to be backed by gold. But that implies that gold has some sort of intrinsic value. But all we've ever used gold for, and all it's ever been good for, is that it represents power, it represents wealth, and that it was universally scarce. It was something that the whole world knew of as scarce. But it wasn't anything tangible, it was just a ledger. It's because, you know, people would say, oh, the US dollar is backed by gold, so that implies gold has value, but it wasn't. Gold is just a ledger, and it's been the best ledger humanity has ever came across. I'll touch on that later. But the last myth is that money is government sponsored or it's created by government. But as you guys kind of saw, money is just created out of a social need, right? There was a social need here for a better way for people to exchange and for tribes to exchange with tribes. So it just came out of a social need. So from where we stand today, it's really hard to understand the importance of gold, because we've actually had other universal ledgers. So it says 5,000 years ago when gold started becoming the universal ledger, but there's actually been other universal ledgers from 500 years ago up until now. But even until this day and time, there has been no better ledger. There's been no better universal ledger, no better money at keeping value. So around 5,000 years ago, gold came out, but even though 500 years ago until now, we've had other reserve currencies. So does anybody know right now what the world's reserve currency is? It's the US dollar. And actually, it's not even backed by gold anymore. It's backed by the US dollar. So I'll touch on that later. So yeah, some of the reserve currencies that started coming out around 500,000 years ago. First it started with the Portuguese, then it was the Spanish, then it was the Dutch, then it was the French, then it was the British pound, and then it was the US dollar. So from 500 years ago up until now, we've had paper money. We use paper money as a way to keep track of debt. Now, I didn't touch on this in the objective ledger part, but the reason why people use something scarce in the environment was because if you just had tree leaves as the ledger, you could pick tree leaves at the benefit of yourself, for the benefit of yourself at the expense of everyone else. Does that make sense? Because I said gold has been the best universal ledger to date, and the reason why that was is because even though there were other reserve currencies 500 years ago up until now, they weren't as good a ledger as gold. If you had gold then versus gold now, it kept value better than any of the paper money that existed during those times. And during those times, guys, civilizations rose and fell. So it just shows you what happens when a universal ledger isn't universally scarce. They used universal ledger that was paper, so they could print more paper in theory. You know what I mean? And they would prosper, whereas others wouldn't prosper. And just to give you guys an example, I don't know if you guys know this right now, but has anybody heard what's happening in Venezuela right now, or Zimbabwe? Right now, there's people lining up in Venezuela with shopping carts full of money just to buy food. This is an example of what happens. Basically, the world right now, because the universal ledger is the US dollar, they're printing the US dollar. This is actually where I'm going to show you guys, tell you guys to go on Twitter right now, quickly. Go on Twitter and type in @data veteran. So let me go on and make sure you guys see the same picture as me. This isn't the only picture, this isn't the only graph. There's a lot of other graphs saying the same thing. There's even movies, documentaries about it. Okay, data, D-A-T-A-V-E-T-A-R-E-N. Does everyone see that? It's like a black and white face.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and it says he's a software engineer and computer scientist.
Yeah. On Instagram, on Twitter.
Let me know if you guys found it.
Yeah.
Okay, you have it. You found it? Did you guys find it? No? What did you type in?
It's just the Wi-Fi.
Oh, it's a Wi-Fi signal? Okay. If you can look at someone's screen, like, please look at the screen. This is really gonna show you guys.
Okay, here.
Wait, do we call it like his pictures?
Yeah, and then whenever you guys do find it, go to his media so you can look at his pictures.
Can you say that again? @ what else?
@data, D-A-T-A,
Okay.
veteran, V-E-T-E-R-A-E-T-A-R-E-N.
Are we looking at the monetary base?
Yes. So whenever you guys find his profile, go to the media and go to the second picture that shows the US monetary base. Does everyone have that?
Yeah.
Because they're printing more. In 2010.
Okay, everybody can see the picture? Everyone's looking at the picture?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you guys have noticed, there's a slow rise, and then around 2008, it just kind of shoots up. This is when Bitcoin was released into the world. Nobody owned it. It was like everybody knows what software is, right? Free software. Like how you guys download music right now. Like you guys use LimeWire or that was old, Kidz or torrents. Does anybody know what torrents are?
Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about.
But the point is, around 2008, Bitcoin came out, and as you can see there in the graph, there's a huge spike. This is real, guys. The U.S. dollar is the world's reserve currency, but there's centralized power. Like, it's not decentralized, the money supply, which means nobody controls it. Centralized means that someone controls the money supply, and this is what happens when someone controls the money supply. There have been other examples of this in history, so this is just another example. But that's a massive spike, and that's the reason why Bitcoin was released into the world, is because it came out of a social need. There's a social need right now for a better universal ledger than gold, and a better universal ledger than the reserve currencies that have been used up until now. Because with these reserve currencies, anyone can just print more money, or they can pick more tree leaves for the benefit of themselves at the expense of everybody else. And I know you guys don't feel it right now because we live in a very privileged area of the world. We don't feel it, we don't hear about it. You only hear about it through the internet and through other people's stories. But as I told you with Venezuela, it's not just Venezuela that's lining up with shopping carts full of money. And that's happening to them because they're not part of the centralized power. Zimbabwe is another example. Their money is just, the paper money is worse than Venezuela. It's also happening right now in Argentina, not to the same extent, but Argentina, Brazil, Greece, Cyprus. All these countries are slowly starting to feel the effect of what happens when you print more money, when centralized powers print more money. So I just wanted you guys to see that graph. So So yeah, that's why gold has been so important, because it's kept value better than any of the other reserve currencies that we've used to date, which is kind of crazy, because I'll tell you why. Because right now, so I want to compare gold versus Bitcoin. So gold, even though it has a universally scarce ledger and 5 attributes, their 5 attributes are not strong. There are huge weaknesses in their attributes. For example, the scarcity of gold is extremely primitive. We're mining more and more gold each year, and it takes millions and billions of dollars to mine this gold, and then we lock it in vaults underground. It's very primitive. You know, you think with all the technology, I could call anyone with Skype across the world for free instantly, and it's just amazing that gold is the best universal ledger with all the technology we have today, right? You'd think there would be a better ledger, and now there is, and it's Bitcoin. Wait, before I want to touch on that, I just wanted to keep saying why the gold's attributes aren't the best. So scarcity is very primitive, and the portability of it with gold, guys, you always have to trust a third party. Anytime, like money is great now, you know, I can hand you money right here and the deal is done, but anytime you want to exchange with somebody outside of the room, you have to trust a third party. And this has been happening for a long time. You've always had to trust a third party. So it has flaws in its scarcity, has flaws in its portability, and then the divisibility of gold. I don't know if you guys know this, but gold can be melted down into like liquid, and then you can take gold out and add other substances like copper. Have you guys heard of that stuff before? Right, and that's been happening for quite a long time. So that was actually the first examples of people kind of printing money. But what they were doing was, the people who controlled gold, they would keep all the real gold for themselves, but when they were giving it to other people, they would fractionally take away more of the gold, and slowly, people's gold became less valuable, and other people's gold became more valuable. Does that make sense? So yeah, people just had to trust that gold was scarce, but now more information is coming out where people don't really trust that gold is scarce, and now you're seeing that there is a disconnect. So enter Bitcoin. It has perfect mathematical scarcity. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. That's it. In terms of portability, no, you don't need to trust third party at all. This is the reason why Bitcoin came out. We wanted to exchange with someone outside of the room without trusting a third party. And that's what Bitcoin does. Right now, I can send any amount of money, anywhere in the world, instantly for free with Bitcoin. This has been happening since 2009. And lastly, the divisibility of it, it's really easy. So for example, 1 Bitcoin is divisible into 1 million Satoshis, it's called. And it's called Satoshis because the person who created, well, we don't even know if it's a person or a group, but someone released the protocol, the technology to the world, and it was released freely. So that's how nobody owns it. But if you downloaded the software and you're connecting to the network. So right now, Bitcoin is a currency and a network. That's the best and simplest way to try to understand what Bitcoin is. It's a currency and it's a network. But I just wanted to show you how Bitcoin was better in terms of scarcity, portability, and divisibility. So why Bitcoin came about? Bitcoin came about, it was because it was like a social need, like the internet. I don't know if you guys know this, but there was a time where people wanted to exchange. I was just telling you how there's a social need right now for people to exchange money outside of a room. But there was a time where people wanted to exchange information outside of a room. That's how the internet was created. It was created out of a social need. People wanted to exchange information with each other outside of the room without trusting a third party. So the reason why Bitcoin is so revolutionary is because it has solved two fundamental problems that have never been solved ever before in the history of humanity. One problem was called the double spending problem, as I guys showed you with the printing money. There was no way. You had to use a third party to verify transactions. There was no way of trusting that that transaction happened and that transaction was fair. You always had to trust a third party, and that's what the double spending problem solved. And it also solved what's called, in computer science, it's called the Byzantine generals problem. All that means is there was no way for a group of people who didn't know each other to make an exchange or make a trade and trust each other. Once again, you always had to trust a third party. So like I was saying with the currency and the network, what Bitcoin created was a digital currency. When it solved these problems, it created a digital currency. And this digital currency, the best way to understand it is it's a currency. You can use it, it's like cash on the internet, but it's also a network, just like the internet. But when you download this software, there's a way for you, when you download the software, there's a way for anyone to be able to verify transactions when they happen. So it's a currency and a network, but this network, at the same time, everyone is making transactions across the world, it's being verified by that network. So that's how it functions without any third party. So it's cash on the internet that nobody controls. Does that sort of make sense now to what Bitcoin is? Okay, sort of. Why are you going like this?
A little bit.
What am I missing? Or is there anything you want to ask? Maybe later? Okay, sorry for putting you on the spot. So yeah, with those problems solved, the double spending and the Byzantine general problem, it allowed for the first example of triple entry bookkeeping. We've always used double entry bookkeeping, so we've always had to trust, once again, a third party to verify all the transactions. They're called clearinghouses. But with the perfect mathematical scarcity of Bitcoin, the 21 million, that made Bitcoin universally scarce. And the Byzantine general problem, it was solved by this technology called proof of work. All you guys need to know is it was a way for the network to verify the transactions that are happening on the network. So that allowed for the first example ever, triple entry bookkeeping. So I just want to give you guys a concept to understand, another little concept to understand what Bitcoin is better. So not only is it a currency and a network, it's also a scarce digital asset. So that's technically the invention of Bitcoin. It's the first example of a scarce digital asset and a universal ledger. So now we have a better universal ledger than gold. And right now, I'll tell you how many people are using it and get into the future about it in a second. But so currency and network, scarce digital asset, and universal ledger. So Bitcoin, so I talked about the technology of it. So there isn't just Bitcoin. I know I told you guys, I was just saying Bitcoin, but when I was saying the currency and the network is called the blockchain. So imagine the first transaction that was done with Bitcoin, when it was verified by the network, it made a block. And then when the next transaction happened, it made another block. So just imagine a block that keeps going and going with each transaction. And that's just what the blockchain is. I won't get into that unless you guys want to learn more about it, and you can have my email after and learn more about it. But so currency and network, Bitcoin and blockchain. The best way I can help you guys understand this is Bitcoin and the blockchain is like email and the internet. When email first came about, people thought email was the internet. it wasn't until the www, the World Wide Web, the browser, it's called TCP/IP. It wasn't until that came out did the internet really start catching on and did it really start appealing to the masses. But it first started with email. So, like the email is just an application of the internet. It was the first application of the internet. That's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the first application of the blockchain. So think of the World Wide Web and the blockchain as platforms. So with the World Wide Web, you had a platform to exchange information, but email was just the first application of the internet, of the technology behind the internet. So that's all Bitcoin is. It's an app, and the blockchain is a platform. And Bitcoin was the first example on the blockchain of an application, and of course it was money. Now there's a lot of other applications being built on top of the blockchain, because the blockchain verifies everything. So if you guys want to register assets or ownership of something, or create a contract, you can verify it on the blockchain, and pretty much the network verified that this is true, this exists, and this is real. And if you have proof of that, it's yours. Nobody can say anything about it. At least that's what's happening with the Bitcoin and the blockchain here. So just to give you, quickly, just to finish up, I just want to give you a little kind of vision of where I see Bitcoin going in the future from now. So right now, well not right now, there's always been three functions of money. The first one is store of value. So people store it and hope that it keeps its value. The other one is a payment mechanism, to pay for things. And then the last one is a unit of account. So you can price things off of Bitcoin. Right now, people are mostly using Bitcoin as a store of value. There's roughly about 10 to 15 million in the world right now holding Bitcoin, using it as a store of value. I don't see, and that's where Bitcoin is in the stage right now. I don't see it really taking off until it reaches the payment mechanism or the unit of account, right? Once people start using it to make global transactions, think about Western Union right now. If you guys want to send money worldwide, it costs on an average of 9%. And there's a lot of people that have to send money back home, and they're always getting taxed, or they're always getting percentages off of it. But once Bitcoin becomes used to transfer money across borders, to make cross-border payments, that's when it will become a payment mechanism. And then once you start seeing it used as a unit of account, a way to price things, that's when it's going to really take off. And I do firmly believe that it will be, in your lifetime and my lifetime, the world's reserve currency. I was saying how there is gold as the world's reserve currency, or there is other paper money as the world's reserve currency, but I do believe in my lifetime that it will be, I don't even want to say lifetime, like 20, 30 years from now, it'll be the world's reserve currency that people will base value off of. So I'm not saying government money or paper money is just going to go out the door and this system is going to take over. I'm just saying it's going to be used as a way to keep track of debt, a way to keep track of everyone's debt. But it's fair. Bitcoin is by the people, for the people. And so the last thing I want you guys to understand, it'll take less than 2 minutes, is the key to this evolving is decentralization. I know I said this word before. Decentralization only means nobody controls it. So Bitcoin is the first example of the world's first decentralized digital currency. There have been other examples of this in the past before. So just to give you guys an example, when I was growing up and I was hearing about what was happening in the internet, I heard about Napster. I didn't use it until I started hearing about LimeWire. But what it was a way for people to exchange files without a third party. And they used the internet. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the government actually shut Napster down because the music industry didn't like what they were doing. They were downloading CDs and they were sharing with people freely. And the music industry wasn't getting a piece of it, they weren't profiting, so of course they didn't like it. And then, so this is what I really want you guys to understand. Even though they shut down Napster, the technology was still there. It was decentralized, the idea. And as long as the internet was there and the people were there and the social need was there, another example of it would have been created. would have been created, and it was. There was LimeWire, which I started using, and then there was Kidz and email, etc. So now we have lots of ways to download music without having to go out and buy a CD in the comfort of our own home. And so that was an example of file sharing. And now there are people in the world that use things called torrents. It's just larger file sharing. So if, say, instead of just music you want to share a movie or something big. Torrents was created. And once again, like Napster, the first example of torrents was shut down. It was called the Pirate Bay. And they were shut down, they were taken to court, government went after them, yada, yada, yada. But once again, you cut off one head, with this decentralization, 5 more pop up. So the technology and the social need was there, more examples were created, and now there's tons of websites that do the exact same thing. And right now, torrents run 25% of the world's internet traffic. That's what happens with the internet as a platform, and when people have a social need and people want to exchange ideas or exchange information, it happens. They make it happen. That's it. That's it. Does anyone have any questions? If not, that's okay. Think about, I know I just gave you guys a lot of information. Think about if you guys have any questions, and if you want to learn more, or if you want to learn about the details of Bitcoin, that's my email and that's my Twitter account. I can send you guys whatever you want, but I'm hoping the reason why my friend Vital is here, I started a meetup last year trying to get together the Bitcoin community, and all we want to do is we want to educate the Brampton community about Bitcoin. It's that simple, and we don't want to do it for profit or anything. We're doing it for free. But if at some point in time someone sees value in what we do, they can give us something of equal value in their head. They don't have to pay money to just say, okay, you gave me something valuable, here's something valuable back. So that's what we're trying to create in Brampton right now. You guys are actually the first time I've ever presented to a group of people since I've been studying Bitcoin since 2009. So thank you guys for being here and listening. And I know you guys can't understand this now, but you will in the future. I was actually so excited to come here and talk to you guys about this. It's actually like my dream to educate people about Bitcoin. So, my friend here, he works for the banks as well. Do you want to talk about what banks are doing as well?
So basically the banks see that there's a potential for this in the future. So banks don't usually get into things like this because they're very conservative and they don't want to explore things. But this is something they just can't ignore. So as a result, they've opened units just to explore the idea, and they may not have a direction on where to go, but they know the potential, so they've put the money in to actually build something and look at the possibilities of Bitcoin. And more importantly for them, it's more about the network than Bitcoin. So they're really looking at the blockchain, and it's very important to them. So not just the banks here in Toronto, Canada, but like banks worldwide. So there's lots of interest and lots of money being put into looking at the blockchain technology.
That was perfect. I couldn't have said it any better. Yes?
Is Bitcoin did it originate from Canada?
No. So the way Bitcoin was created, nobody knows who created Bitcoin. So there was an email list of, they were called cryptographers, and it was called the cypherpunk email list. But it was a small group of community that really understood computers. They really understood how they work. Has anyone here heard of cryptography? You heard of cryptography? What it is, it's coding. It's information given to the computer to make certain things happen. So it's like writing instructions for someone to go do something. That's what cryptography is. It's so complicated. I never got into it. I don't even want to get into it. I know my strengths and weaknesses. So, yeah, it's very technical. So what happened was once 2008 happened, the creator there were already actually different versions of digital money trying to be created in since the internet, about 10 years after the internet. So Bitcoin is only the first working example, but it actually uses some of the technologies from that email list, because people gave examples of other monies, DigiCash, Hashcash. That proof of work, what I was telling you about, that was used by Hashcash. But so anyways, this person who gave the information away freely, he used existing technology to put together Bitcoin in the blockchain, and he just gave it away for free. Just put it on the list, and he put it on the list in around 2008, and the first transaction didn't happen until 2009. And the first transaction was actually someone bought a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoins. So it was someone from like New York to France or something. And right now, one Bitcoin is worth roughly 500 Canadian dollars. Oh shoot, I shouldn't even have said that because you guys are probably just going to be more confused, but I'll tell you, I could explain if you guys want to know more, like I'll tell you in a minute. Yes?
So why didn't you pay like 10,000 Bitcoins for one pizza?
So that's the thing. Since there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins, that means it has to start off at a really, really crappy value.
Oh, okay. So like, is like inflation or something? Or?
It's the opposite of inflationary. It's deflationary. So at the beginning, it will be, and it was, extremely volatile. There was actually a time in 2014 where the only exchange being used for, well, there's a couple other, but the main one, like 95% of transactions, it actually crashed and something happened with it, like a hack happened or whatever. But that was the first example of an exchange. But don't worry, decentralization happened, and now there's tons of different exchanges that have popped up and have solved the problem there. So at the beginning, it'll fluctuate, it'll be volatile, but over time, because